Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell. You'll get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And when I'm not asking Bruce, hey, how big was Batista's? Well, you know. One of the things I like to do is help people save money. And if you're watching this video right now and you're in a 30-year loan, man, you're overpaying your single biggest bill and you may not even realize it. I want you to do a little experiment for me. Take your calculator out, multiply your monthly house payment by 360 payments. That's how many payments there are in a 30-year loan. That big scary number, that's your total of payments. You're looking at that number? You know you can do better. Keep more of your own money right now and go to savewithconrad.com. Or maybe you've got credit card debt. Man, it's not a matter of if I can save you money with that. Your average interest rate on a credit card is more than 20%. And by the way, all the interest you pay on those credit cards, it's not tax deductible. Whereas the mortgage interest, well, that is tax deductible. So if you owe this debt, it's up to you how to pay it back. Doesn't it make sense to get the cheapest rate possible and the greatest tax deduction possible? Find out how much money you can save right now for free at savewithconrad.com. You don't need perfect credit. Even scores in the 500s can be approved, and it's no cost out of pocket. But maybe best of all, we're licensed in more than 40 states. We can help more families than ever before. But how much can we save you? Find out right now for free with a quick quote from savewithconrad.com.
Hello and welcome to 83 Weeks with Eric Bischoff. This is Paul Bromwell sitting in for Conrad Thompson this week, and I'm joined by the Hall of Famer, Eric Bischoff. Eric, how are you this week?
I am just awesome. Actually, as we speak, you and I today, recording the show, Sunday morning, I am packing up, and Mrs. B and I are on our way down to Florida to hang with the Thompson family on the beach for 4 or 5 days. So that's going to be swell. Then we're heading over to Tampa, Clearwater, and going to hang out with the kids and the grandkid and do a little of that. So I got a lot of fun stuff to look forward to, brother. And while people are listening to this, I've actually been on the beach. So I'm looking forward to it.
Now, peek behind the curtain. We're doing this about a week earlier than we normally would because of vacation schedules and things. It's spring break time, Eric. It's that time of year. And you said it, the Thompsons. That's where Conrad's at. He's getting a little time off with the wife and his daughters, and he's due. If anybody needs a little bit of time off and deserves it, it's him.
Oh my gosh, no kidding, right?
But that's going to be fun. Now that's going to be a nice time down there. Should be good weather for sure. Hope you guys have had a nice time.
Conrad found this house. Now again, this is weird because by the time people hear this, I've already been there. But as we're recording this, I'm looking forward to going. It's a weird mind fuck. But Conrad told me that he rented a Jeep so that we can ride up and down the beach, because evidently where this big, beautiful home is that he Airbnb'd, you can actually drive on the beach. So nice. I got this image in my head of me and Mrs. B, right around sunset, driving up and down the beach, little glass of wine, watching it all come down over the. This is going to be awesome.
Conrad only knows how to do it one way, my friend, and it's the right way, yes. Especially when it comes to vacations and things like that. Man, I just hope you guys have a great time.
I'm sure we will, and I'm sure we did.
There you go. What a dichotomy. All right, well, listen, let's jump into what we're here about this week, and we're talking about Sting and his 1998. Eric, do you remember Sting from 1998 at all?
yeah, just a bit. It's still a memory bouncing around. Oh, there's my duck. Sorry, I'll turn my phone off. I love when that happens, though.
Yeah.
Here, do me a favor, and never mind. We're playing silly games. Let's just stop. Let's just do what we came here to do, and
that's right. It's all good.
Around.
All right. Well, listen, the reason we're talking about Sting today, Eric, though, is because he, as this drops, would have just turned 63 years old on March 20th. This guy went from being retired and not medically cleared to work in the WWE to jumping off balconies and going through tables in AEW. Do you think this is how Sting envisioned his career coming to an end? It's unbelievable.
I don't know. Steve and I never talked about that at any time. But here's what I do believe is true. Because I'm sure in Sting's mind, his career has ended a couple times. You know, I'm sure there's been more than one time when he was convinced, okay, this is it, time to move on. I'm going to walk away. But like all of us, not throwing myself in his category necessarily, but people that perform, people that have gone out there at a fairly high level and gotten addicted to that fan energy and the reaction that you get, and addicted in a way, in a healthy way, I should say, to that connection and being able to entertain and create emotion in 3, 4, 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 people all at one time. That's a pretty powerful drug, buddy. And it's tough to just walk away from it. But I don't think Sting would have even imagined, and he's an optimistic guy. He's a positive dude. But I don't think even in Sting's mind, he would have been able to 20 or 25 years ago say, you know what, when I'm 63 years old, I'm going to still be doing this, and I'm still going to be operating or playing at such a high level. I don't think he would have imagined it. I certainly didn't.
It's incredible, man. I was in the building for Revolution, and to hear the crowd go wild for him, forget about jumping off the balcony through 4 tables. But at 62 years old then, doing what he did, the popularity that he still has, it's just so cool to see how not only has his character evolved, but even after the injury, he finally got that WWE moment. It was later on in his career. We would love to seen it a little bit earlier, I think. But man, it's just so cool to see a guy like him, because he's one of the nicest guys in the world. I've had an opportunity to meet him once or twice, and you just can't help but be genuinely happy for someone like him. And he seems like he's in a very happy place in his life right now.
He's been in a good place for quite a while.
Yeah,
but you're right. He is one of those people that, forget about his character in the ring. He's one of those people that you're just rooting for Steve Borden, the person, because the person is such a good human being. And he's had his ups and downs. He's had his challenges, like everybody in life. Nobody gets to escape it. It's part of life. It's part of what makes you stronger and better able to have empathy with others who are struggling. I think it all depends how you look at it. But Steve is a guy who looked at his challenges and dealt with them, overcame them, and is now not only to enjoy doing what he loves to do and what he's loved to do for a long time, and to be financially successful and all the things that come with it. But he's also someone that, like DDP, like Lex Luger, spends a lot of time trying to help other people in his way. And that just makes me more excited about it. It makes me happier for him to see him experiencing it, because he really is one of the good guys.
Well, Eric, let's jump into it. Let's go back. Let's get in our time machines and travel back to an era long ago, 1998. It's Sting, and we're coming out of Starrcade. He is the world champion after that finish between him and Hulk Hogan, Nick Patrick. And if you haven't already, make sure you go check it out in the archives at adfreeshows.com or youtube.com/83 weeks. It's the classic Conrad and Eric discussion, argument, whatever you want to call it, about the finish if you haven't already. And as we begin 1998 for Sting, do you remember what your confidence level was in him at this point as your world champion, Eric?
Oh, it was very high. I mean, look, I'm not going to dig into Starrcade 97. We've covered that in depth. And it didn't go the way any of us wanted it to go. There were too many variables that were indicators that it was not the right time. But we dealt with it. And a lot of people were disappointed in the finish, and we did the best we could to kind of keep the story going forward. From the point where we made the decision, okay, Starrcade wasn't what we wanted, but we're not going to just walk away from this. We're going to keep it going with Sting and Hogan. And I had a ton of confidence in Sting, Steve Borden, the person, and Sting, the character. There's never an issue of not having confidence in him.
Well, here we go. Our first Meltzerism of the week. He would say this: it would be a great phrase to say that 16 months of work was exposed about halfway through Sting's walk down the aisle and before he ever got in the ring. The mythical superhero turned human right before the fans' very eyes. It wasn't if it was a bad wrestling match that did it, although the match itself was bad. But you could see the big initial pop after all the hype and special effects didn't even last until Sting made it to the ring. The match itself was a struggle. Would you agree with his assessment there?
I don't know. Honestly, I'd have to go back and look at it. And I didn't do that research before the show, so I apologize in advance because I should have an answer for that. And I don't. Blame it on a fun weekend. No, really, the weather we went from like just brutal cold, 20 below zero, 23 below zero, 40 mile an hour winds, wind chills of like 30 below. And yesterday it was 60 and sunny. So when it gets that nice out, I tend to spend a lot of time outside and didn't do the research I should have done. So I'd have to go back and look at it, to be honest with you. I don't like to just blow holes in Meltzer just for the fun of doing it, which it is a pretty good time. But I like to have a basis for it. So,
well, hey, listen,
I'll give him that one just on, my lack of familiarity with that entrance.
Well, I can tell you'll have some more opportunities this show to do that. So to blow holes at Meltzer. So we'll get there. Thunder is set to debut in early 1998. It's Thunder time. Was the plan to have Sting slotted to be the big part of the debut of Thunder, Eric?
Yes. I mean, look, we've talked about it so much. I hesitate to even mention it again, but the plan with WCW Nitro and WCW Thunder was Nitro NWO, Thunder WCW. And obviously Sting was a WCW guy. So clearly Sting was going to be right there at the top in terms of what we were building upon.
Well, WCW debuts at the Georgia Dome on the first Nitro in '98, and it's Sting, as far as him and Luger, they're fighting off the NWO. Once the chase is all over for Sting and he becomes champion, what is the plan as far as keeping him hot, keeping that character going? Did you feel like there was any kind of creative struggles? Okay, we finally made it. The big push of Sting and the Crow Sting to get him the title. Now he's a champion. Where do we go next? Was there a struggle with that, Eric, to try to keep the momentum going with him?
No, but it's interesting because thinking back about it from the perspective I have now, what there should have been, and perhaps there was to various levels or degrees, but there should have been a pretty good conversation going about what happens to Sting's character now that he's gone from, my friends, the people I've known for so long they doubt me. They don't trust me anymore. That was the catalyst for the whole brooding, scary Sting character, right? WCW no longer believed in him as a character, and they thought that perhaps he was guilty of things he wasn't really guilty of. Well, now that we've cleared all that up, now we're fast forwarding to this point, 1998. Now that we've played that story out for the last, whatever it was, year and a half, what happens to Sting's character? Now that he's reclaimed his rightful position of leadership and integrity as a character in WCW, how does that impact the character? Does he stay the same? And again, this is something I wish we would have talked in depth about back then, because it would have been important in order to really advance the story the way it should have been advanced. We should have seen not a new Sting necessarily, but a different Sting. We should have seen things in Sting's character that kind of harkened back to the Surfer Sting character, because now he was in that leadership position as a world champion and proven that he was innocent of all doubt and consideration in terms of him, being an evil dude, being a part of the NWO. But I don't know that we saw that.
No, you're absolutely right, because it was like it was on his mission. He was the mission for not only for revenge, but to be the savior and come back. So now what? Where does he go from here?
Well, I mean, the now what in terms of storylines are easy, because as they always are, when you're the world champion, when you're the baby face, when you're the leader, when you're the hope. And that's what that really is for WCW. He was the hope, that WCW was going to come back and finally, put a nail in the coffin of NWO and things would go back to normal, kind of like everybody was hoping to get rid of the COVID mandates and wearing masks and being afraid to go outside and all that crap. We were hoping that at some point this is going to come to an end. Well, Sting was that hope for WCW. So the storylines going forward would have been easy in the sense that the NWO or whatever heel, even within WCW, on the WCW side of the roster, was there to take him down because everybody wants that power. Everybody wants to be in that position, theoretically. What's really interesting, Paulie, is I was thinking about this a couple months ago. I don't know what got me thinking about it, but I think one of the things that's lacking across the boards, WWE, WCW, WWE and AEW, is real stakes. When I say real stakes, I mean within the context of sports entertainment, meaning, so what if you win a title? What does that mean? That people can relate to.
Right.
What does it mean to win a world championship? Well, it means you get to brag. It means you get to come out with that belt over your shoulder. It means that there's a lot of attention on you. None of that is really relatable to the audience, is it? It's gratifying as a performer because it's a recognition that you've reached a certain level in your industry and the company believes in you and they're going to focus on you and hopefully grow their business, because of you being in that position and the stories that ensue. That's what it all means internally, like behind closed doors or behind the curtain. But what does it mean to the audience for someone to win a world championship? In UFC, it's money, right? Mm-hmm. You win the majority of the purse. In the NFL, it's the pride, it's the struggle, but guess what? You get a big ass check too. And that's relatable. But in wrestling, we don't talk about that, do we? There's no direct association between winning a world championship, which in every other sport is relatable because of the financial impact it has on people and what it's going to do for their careers going forward when you're, the Super Bowl, champion quarterback or whatever, you're on the team, right? You're a star on the team. It's all relatable to people, but in wrestling, it's not.
No,
and
you're absolutely, yeah.
It would be interesting, and I know this is too hard and this isn't the right place to have this conversation, but it would be really interesting if there was a way. And I don't mean back when I was a kid, it was like a $50,000 battle royale. You couldn't do that today, but that's what I mean. It was relatable to people. It was there were stakes that people could go, well, oh yeah, I'd want to fight for $50,000. How many of us have ever thought, when I get in the ring with Mike Tyson, when Mike Tyson was in his prime? Well, for, part of that purse, hell yeah. I'll let anybody beat the shit out of me for a couple $1,000,000. No problem. I'll heal, and when I do, I'm fat. I like it. but in wrestling, we don't have that. I'd like to see that. And something else I'd like to see? This has nothing to do with what we're here to talk about. It just has nothing to do with it. I didn't even think about this until now.
Sure show, Eric. Go at it, man. Go.
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty loose here, right? We don't stick to formats around here. Fuck that shit. And this is really a what if. Okay, it's 8:00 in the morning or whatever it is here. I'm still a little slow. Haven't had enough coffee. But what if? Come on, fantasize with me, people. What if WWE in AEW, and hell, throw in a couple of the smaller ones too, like Impact, whatever. What if there was a legitimate agreement between the three companies? Because they're never going to work together in any meaningful way, AEW and WWE. It's just not going to happen. You've got networks that don't want to have it. I mean, there's no way that will ever happen. However, one thing that I know I could pitch a network that I could get them to buy into was a relationship between WWE and AEW or anybody else, well, including anybody else, I guess, whereby once a year, they agree to trades, just like you have in any other sport, so that you have a legitimate conversation that could actually transpire about talent going back and forth.
Wow.
Not in a, well, their contract's up, because guess what? We all know if a top talent's contract's up, they're going to either WWE from AEW, Cody Rhodes, or they're going from WWE, who knows how many people, to AEW. You already know it's going to happen.
Right.
So why not make that fun? Why not make that a story? Look, I think one of the reasons that, and I keep talking about the NFL because I'm a passive NFL fan. I don't watch a lot of it. I don't spend time listening to talk radio shows about it. I'm not deep into it, but I like to watch it, especially during the playoffs. But I'm sure the same is true in basketball and in baseball. Part of the fun in those respective sports is where are players going to go? Which players are likely to go? And when those players are under a long-term contract, well, there's no conversation about that. But what if Sami Zayn, for example, and I don't know how to structure this, I'd have to think more about it. This has just come to me. But again, set up a system whereby certain people within your roster, not your top guys, that's not going to happen. That's not real. But the middle of the card, down below the card, some of the emerging talent, some of the young, new, fresh talent, you have it written into their contract that those contracts may be traded to another wrestling organization under the same terms, by the way. So I just think it would add so much more fun conversation into the narrative about wrestling, where it's normally kind of negative, right?
Oh,
it would be hopeful.
Yeah. If
you've got talent in WWE, for example, Braun Breaker. Okay, well, he's still within his, here I'm trying to put structure to this. He's still, he's been in the business for less than 3 years, under a contract for WWE for less than 3 years, or whatever it's been. He is eligible for a draft. So as we're watching Braun's character grow and become more important, now you've got legitimate chatter. Could he possibly get traded? Would WWE trade him, say, for somebody who's really hot in AEW that maybe isn't at the top, but WWE sees a lot of potential in? And I just think having that kind of back and forth chatter would be the equivalent of, what do people talk about? When the NFL's over, they can't wait to, for the combines to start. They can't wait for the draft. It's keeping that sport alive 365 days a year. And I think you could do the same thing, although wrestling is already 365 days a year. I think you could add an interesting, credible backstory narrative that would keep the fans even more engaged in a more positive way. And, oh man, I can't stand, did you see that finish? Their promos suck. I mean, it's such a negative narrative, but I think this could be fun. I have to give it a lot more thought. Literally just rolled off the top of my head, but that would be fun, wouldn't it?
Are you kidding me? It would become the biggest event of the year in wrestling. And it would also, I think, take away some of this negativity of WWE versus AEW. When it comes down to fans and social media, I think it would just do a lot for this. Man, it would be awesome if it could work out. Fantasy wrestling, are you kidding?
It's got to be. Well, it kind of is, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It kind of is. And again, I don't know how you would structure it to actually execute upon it. I'm sure it could be done. The biggest hurdle would be getting anybody to agree to it. Meaning, WWE and AEW, but in the long run, like if I owned NBC or pick a major network, and I was going to commit to the wrestling industry, and I decided I was going to buy WWE and I was able to buy AEW, that's what I would do as a network. I would sit back and say, okay, guys, we got to take this to the next level. I hate using that, it's overused, but okay, we're here. This is where we're at today. We need to go to here. How do we do that? That's one discussion that I would have. And if you owned both companies, you could effectively do it.
Yeah.
It'd be awesome. You'd have to be careful that it doesn't become the Raw SmackDown draft situation.
That's right.
Because that is, at the very least, it is not interesting. And in reality, it is a huge challenge every year. It is it's a pain in the ass to figure that out. And I think for fans, it really doesn't mean much. This is something that could mean a lot.
Yeah, it would have to have that structure too, like you said, in NFL, where, hey, this is the set dates of what we're doing and how we're doing it, and we don't deviate. If someone get injured, they're injured. It's not, let's start swapping.
And you'd have the
around.
legitimate, just like you do in real sports, you'd have certain players that would like, look, I know I've got 4 years left of my contract, and I know I'm not eligible for a trade, but I want to be.
I want to be Russell Wilson. Move me.
That would be so awesome. Come on, people. Get with the program. Think big. Think of a different way to do what we've been doing for so long on television. Add something to it that actually changes not just the creative, but the dynamic, the strategy. Make it bigger, folks. Make it bigger.
And with that, we'll transition back to Sting 1998. So, Eric, we'll keep going. Now, that is fantastic. I love the concept. The creativity's still flowing in you, Eric. It's still alive, man. It's still alive. But we're coming back here to the debut episode of something else that you created, Thunder, and it featured J.J. Dillon announcing the WCW World title is vacant because of what's happened, and it'll be decided at Super Brawl between Hulk and Sting. It's interesting because they skipped sold out pay-per-view altogether and pushed it to Super Brawl. What were Hulk's thoughts about working with Sting again at this point? Do you remember or recall what he was thinking about? Oh, okay, I'm going to work with Sting again. Was he feeling some kind of way about that?
I think he was excited about it. Look, Hulk loved working with Sting. Absolutely loved it because the magic was there and you could feel it. You could see it. You could count it at the end of the night. You could measure it in every practical way. So he was excited about it. Look, we're all of us, we're still affected to one degree or another at the way things didn't turn out at Starrcade. And this was a way to attempt to get back on track and make it right. And Hulk was excited about that. He wanted to get that magic back. And he was excited physically to get in the ring with Sting because Sting is such a great performer, still is.
Well, Eric, Sold Out ends with Lex Luger versus Randy Savage on top, and the NWO attacks Sting, and the show goes off the air with Sting having Hogan in the Scorpion Deathlock. Are there any issues or signs of potential issues with Sting at this time?
No, none at all. None at all. Look, we dealt with what we dealt with. We moved on, and this was in large part the Sting that we had back in 96 and 97, early 97.
Well, buddy, Sting versus Hogan isn't dead by any means when it comes to setting records because you set a crowd and a gate record for a non-televised event in Boston at the Fleet Center, getting 18,134 paid for 325,154 with Hulk versus Sting in a cage as the main event. This is also the first ever internet pay-per-view listen event as well.
No, wait a minute. You're telling me we drew a 300,000 plus house in Boston for a house show?
For a house show, Eric.
Wow, those were the days, brother.
But this internet pay-per-listen event, okay? You were on the cutting edge of everything back then, and
I still am, brother. I'm on the cutting edge of life.
But man, I was reading through that, and I thought, my goodness, already thinking ahead of times. The internet. Here we are, Eric. Was making things happen back then. Sting gets the win after both would be bleeding, and Meltzer speculates that both got away with blading against company policy. And it's reported that Hogan got a better reaction than Sting in terms of crowd pop. Was this Crow Sting losing its luster once the bell rang, as Bruce likes to say?
Look, every town, every city has its own personality and its own legacy. Hulk Hogan. There was a lot of people in that crowd that were Hulk Hogan fans back in, the 80s, the late 80s and the early 90s. They still remembered that Hulk Hogan. So you can't judge the reaction of a national audience or an international audience based on the reaction to one local crowd. So I would say, no, the Hulk's reaction had a lot more to do with just being Hulk Hogan in Boston. I mean, that's really WWE,
Yes. That's
Madison Square Garden is their backyard. Well, guess what? So is Boston.
That's right.
Probably just as much.
Makes total sense when you say it, Eric, as you think about it. They were in Boston so much through the Hulkamania days, and that crowd just got to be so excited to see
And that loyalty doesn't go away.
Yeah.
It just doesn't,
Well, the numbers would come in for Starrcade, and when you compare Starrcade 96 with Hogan versus Piper to 97 with Hogan versus Sting, I want to share a few numbers with you. I know you like numbers, Eric. I know it's early, but these will definitely...
Really, I'm reaching for my calculator because
these are going to resonate.
I have only had one cup of coffee, and I'm barely functional on one cup of coffee.
This is not too overwhelming. These are pretty easy. Estimated average attendance for 96, 3,911. In 97 for that Starrcade, 7,649. That's 95.6% increase there. The gate went from 48,000 to 138. I'm sorry, yeah. Plus 188% there. Starrcade, when you talk about the buy rate in 96, 0.95 buy rate for 2.85 million. In 97, 1.9 buy rate for 6.85 million. That's 100% increase in buy rate and 150% increase in overall revenue. Do you attribute that to just Sting?
No, no. You can never. I don't think you can ever do that. You can't look at one character or one performer or even two at the top over an extended period of time like we did with Hogan and Sting and say it's because of those two. It's because of the story. It's because of the NWO. It's because of so much of what was happening underneath it to push the audience's interest to such a great level. And that's the kind of thing, when I always talk about growing the audience, I know I beat up on that a lot, but that's what this industry needs. I firmly believe that in any business, it doesn't matter. You're either growing or you're dying. You may be dying a very, very, very slow death, or you may be dying a fast death. But if you're growing, you're not dying. And by not growing, and one could argue that the audience is still atrophying. There are less people watching wrestling today than there were 20 years ago. Just is a fact. You need, and look, I think it would be hard to recreate the kind of growth that WCW experienced between 95 and 98. It would be really hard because things have changed so much. But incrementally, this audience should be growing. The story should be more compelling. The characters should be becoming more, and they're not across the board. Everybody's gradually losing audience. People will say, well, but AEW is 15% ahead of where they were last year. But there's variables there. And there's a reason for that. Let's see where we're at, a year from now. But we're still not seeing in WWE or in AEW the kind of incremental growth across the board that I think is necessary for the business to remain healthy. And I could be wrong on that. I'm not in the programming market. I'm not negotiating licensing rights anymore. A lot of things have changed, and I understand it. I admit that. But in general, just knowing how TV works, your audience is either growing or eventually somebody's going to be looking for something to replace you with that will grow. So there you go. There's my stand on that. Yes, we were growing the business by leaps and bounds. And I love hearing these numbers. It's almost hard to believe.
And the beauty of that matchup, too, was the build and letting it breathe. And like you said, having the NWO and their dominance and reign. Everybody wanted to finally see that taken down, and you had to have that. You had to have that side, that build, and that angle was built for a while with Sting in the rafters. So it came to a place where it became a box office attraction that people could not wait to see. So there you go. The entrances for Sting keep getting higher and higher, as at the Alamo Dome in San Antonio, Sting is in the main event against Randy Savage, and he comes down from about 40 stories high. Did you ever talk to Sting, or did Sting ever talk to you or anyone else about any issues with all these high places and coming down from the rafters?
In the very beginning, when we first started doing that with Sting, yeah, there was a lot of conversations about it. I mean, Sting never really, I never got the sense he was afraid of doing it. He was in a very healthy, professional way, concerned about it, wanted to make sure everything was right. But he was always pretty upbeat whenever we talked about it. I mean, he admitted that, it was a little nerve-wracking, but I think after a while, he got more and more and more comfortable. Then I think it became more fun for him. After he got comfortable doing it, after he was convinced that it was going to be safe, then he could enjoy it a lot more than he did early on. But at no point did Sting ever come to me and say, look, dude, that's too high. I can't do that. That never happened.
Yeah, well, listen, this is one I want to talk to you about that I'm interested in hearing what you have to say. It's reported in the Observer that coming off of Mike Tyson being announced for WrestleMania, there was a negotiation that went nowhere to get Evander Holyfield to referee Sting versus Hogan at Super Brawl in the Cow Palace. Any truth to that rumor, or
none
remember that?
Whatsoever. That conversation never happened. Here is probably where that started. Harvey Schiller was the president of Turner Sports. Harvey Schiller was also my boss. And Harvey Schiller was also friends with Evander Holyfield. And there were some discussions between Evander and Harvey, Turner Sports, about exploring different things that they could do together. None of which had anything to do with WCW. But somebody probably saw Evander Holyfield in Evander's office. And I think I actually met Evander in Harvey's office on more than one occasion. And then somebody said, oh my gosh, Eric Bischoff's up talking to Harvey Schiller and Evander Holyfield. Evander Holyfield's coming to WCW. And then it ends up in Dave Meltzer's dirt sheet. That's how that stuff happens. But there was never any discussion about it. I think the discussions had to do with possibly goodwill games, opportunities, hosting different things. Turner Sports was exploring. Harvey was he had a lot of vision, and he was exploring a lot of different things. And he was friends. I mean, legitimate friends with Evander. So that's what that was. That's all it was.
In those days, all it would have taken is to see you with a handshake with Holyfield, and they must be talking about something. Something's going on there.
Yeah, or we could have been, sharing an Arthur Treacher's fish and chips in the commissary.
That's right.
Oh my gosh, you see that, Bischoff, Evander Holyfield? And they're doing it to counter Mike Tyson because Mike Tyson, that's how Dave Meltzer.
I love it.
Just make shit up and connect a bunch of dots that don't really exist, but make them look like they do.
I'll bet you he'll be at Super Brawl. How much you want to bet? Oh, that's good stuff. Well, on Nitro from El Paso, a classic angle where the NWO drops a net on Sting and Luger, and they beat the shit out of them to give Sting a weakness. It looks like going into Super Brawl, it was time to go back to old school heat for Sting, as he's working from underneath instead of the superhuman character, it would appear. And
that's how that works.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you've got a babyface champion that's overcoming all odds, why do I care?
Right.
But if you've got a babyface champion who I really, really love, I'm rooting for, and he's being overwhelmed by the bad guys, now what am I doing? I'm hoping and engaging because I want to see my guy overcome the odds again. I mean, that is as fundamental to wrestling storytelling as it can possibly get.
Wrestling 101. We have some fun going on here with your old pal Nick Patrick, Eric, and from the Observer regarding Super Brawl, J.J. Dillon came out for an interview and said that no charges had ever been brought against Nick Patrick, and after reviewing the tapes, they saw no evidence of wrongdoing, and he was reinstated. Patrick still acted like a heel, even though he kissed Gene Okerlund and hugged Dillon. Patrick then acted like he was going to ref the main event, but Dillon said he wasn't going to ref the main event. Then Patrick wanted to find out about his back pay. The original plan here was to get a famous lawyer from the most famous trial in recent history involved who would show up at the pay-per-view and legally bully Dillon into reinstating Patrick for the main event, rather than Dillon having to basically reverse positions with no logical reason at all. Johnny Cochran was the first choice, but when that didn't materialize, they completed a deal for Robert Shapiro. I'm not making this up. Anyway, a few days before the show, Shapiro must have been talking with someone about doing it, and the person told Shapiro how associating with pro wrestling would affect his image, so he backed out at the last minute, leaving.
Oh my God.
I'll finish. I only got two more. Leaving WCW with no way to transition Angle A to Angle C. After Shapiro nixed the deal, WCW made a last-ditch attempt to get Cochran, who claimed to have liked the idea and would have been willing to do it, but darn those previous commitments. Eric, what say you?
This is the first I've ever heard of this nonsense. Wow. That has to be, that's right up there with Dave Meltzer. And he still refuses to admit that he actually printed this. I actually saw a copy of it when I first commented on it, when Dave Meltzer said that, there's a rumor that Mabel's going to be the third man. Well, after I busted Meltzer's balls on podcasts and let the world know about it and social media lit on fire, Dave actually posted something himself trying to give himself some credibility for suggesting that, and blamed it all on who? X-Pac, who wasn't even in WCW at the time. And I'm sure, I don't know what X-Pac said, but Dave took it, went with it, and it was being considered that Mabel was going to be the third man. That's where that all came from. And yes, Dave, you wrote it, and you justified writing it because you pointed out that X-Pac told you that, but X-Pac wasn't even in WCW and wouldn't have been privy to any of those conversations. He might have heard a rib or a joke, or who knows, he and Scott Hall and Kevin Nash may have gotten together sometime and had a couple glasses of wine or whatever and started throwing shit out there, but it was never a part of any discussion that I had. And this is even worse than that Mabel example.
This is
insane. Absolutely insane. I don't know who fed that to Dave, but Dave, you were a stupid mucker-father if you heard that and you printed it as fact. And I never heard of it until just now. That is so insane.
So I guess that means you weren't talking to Marsha Clark either then, huh?
No, fuck, no. And what makes it funny to me, though, is when you read to me that Johnny Cochran, or whichever one was willing to do it, and then somebody told him that, I don't know, associated with wrestling. It was
Shapiro.
Might be bad for your image. Yeah, Shapiro. Yeah. Might be bad for your image. Mucker Father just defended O.J. Simpson and got him off, for crying out loud. And he's worried about his image? Are you kidding me? Meltzer, you're such a stooge, and not even a good one. You could tell this idiot anything and he'll print it, which is, I think, to a degree, what happens.
I think he
thinks he's getting some insight.
Just laid it out.
Everybody that fed him the news is going to watch this. Dave's going to report this shit.
Wow. Between the Evander Holyfield and now we're into Shapiro and Cochran, I was just like, wow, this is a star-studded episode. I can't.
Because he's got it. Because this is how this idiot's mind works. He has never liked me. I've been calling him out since day one, right? And exposing him. Now I have a platform to do it, so it's much more effective than it used to be when it was just me, without social media and the ability to have these types of conversations on a regular basis. But he had to have something negative to write about WCW because we were kicking WWE's ass. We were performing. We were achieving things that people like Dave Meltzer never thought we would be able to, and certainly not under my leadership, would be able to achieve. Well, fuck, can't put that guy over because I hate his guts, that fucking Bischoff. So I've got to make shit up to make it look like it's dysfunctional, even though it's functioning at a very high level. That's where Dave Meltzer comes from. And that's, now, you see the opposite of that with AEW, right? Because somebody named a wrestling finish move after him in AEW, and he's friends with the Young Bucks. So he's, the advisor to Tony Khan, and he's never going to say anything bad about AEW, whether he should or not. As a journalist, he's not a journalist, but as a dirt sheet writer, he should at least pretend to be objective. But he's not, because of his personal relationship. Well, I had the opposite personal relationship, which is why Dave made up so much of this nonsense, because he had to have something to write about other than the facts. The facts where the WCW was kicking ass. In the early 1998, we were rocking and rolling. It wasn't until the middle of 98 that the wheels started getting a little wobbly and starting to fall off.
So I take it you never won any Observer Awards.
I never got Booker of the Year.
No.
Oh, my God. Dirt Sheet Booker of the Year. What an accomplishment.
Well, listen, I have a feeling that you and Conrad next year are going to cover Super Brawl in long form. It'll be an anniversary year, but we got to touch on the main event because it's Sting, and he regained the vacant WCW title, beating Hulk Hogan in 16 minutes, 32 seconds. And Meltzer would say, since Hogan books his own programs, it was no doubt his own insistence to swerve people at the last minute. But since he was doing the job, he dominated virtually the entire match. The negative of that is his offense is beyond bad. Match was saved by having very good storytelling. Sting made the Superman comeback with 2 stinger splashes and went for the reverse DDT. On the way down, Hogan kicked Patrick, who went down. At this point, the NWO Stooge squad of Conan, Norton, Bagwell, and Vincent ran out, with Sting taking them all out. While this was going on, Savage hit the ring and KO'd Hogan with a spray can. Patrick revived and counted as Sting pinned Hulk Hogan. Hogan sold the blow for several minutes, allowing Sting to spray paint WCW on Hogan's back as the show went off the air. He gave it a half star. Is this the finish that you would have liked to seen from maybe Starrcade in hindsight, or what are your thoughts?
I would have liked to see the clean finish. I would always prefer a clean finish, and no secret, WCW had, I think, some of the worst finishes consistently of any wrestling company in recent history. The finishes sucked. It was always a disappointment. Most of the time, not always. Most of the time it was a disappointment. But no, that's not it. But I want to go back again. This is the last thing I'm going to spend too much time on with regard to Meltzer. Again, going back to the opening of that commentary you just shared from Meltzer. Because Hogan books his own matches, blah, 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 blah. Of course, he put himself over, all that nonsense that Dave said. Then he goes on to say, but it was saved by great storytelling. Well, Hogan dominating the match and Sting coming back to win it was the fucking story, you idiot. And if Hogan laid that out, you're too stupid to know it. But you just gave Hulk Hogan a great compliment. Was his offense great? No. Hulk Hogan's never been a Kurt Angle or an Eddie Guerrero, right? He's never been a technical wrestler. He's been a larger-than-life character that has made, other than probably Rock and maybe Austin, more money than anybody in the history of the business. And adjusted for inflation, yes, even those two. So he's never been known for that, but he was a larger-than-life character, and in Dave's own words, the match had great story. That's what Hogan did, if he indeed laid out that entire match, which, by the way, he didn't. Hulk wasn't the creatively greedy pig that I know Meltzer likes to make him out to be. He had certain things he was comfortable doing, certain things he wasn't comfortable doing, and he had strong feelings about how to get the crowd to react, because I guess in the history of the business, not too many people can meet or exceed Hulk Hogan's ability to hold the crowd in the palm of their hand for as long as Hulk Hogan, the character, did. So he did have a strong opinion, and so did Sting. I'm sure those two worked together on that match. But again, if you listen to Dave Meltzer, Hulk Hogan showed up 2 minutes before showtime, said, Sting, this is what we're going to do because I want to make myself look good because I'm doing the job, which again was never the way that Hulk Hogan approached anything. But again, that's the way Dave liked to cover stuff because he didn't like Hogan either.
Yeah, well, and at the end of the day, he's still Hulk Hogan. He's still drawing. He's still.
Yeah, and by the way, you haven't gotten to it yet. I don't mean to jump around too much here, but as bad as everything we did was with Starrcade 97, what was the gate for this pay-per-view at Super Brawl?
I don't have the gate numbers for that.
Do you have a buy rate?
I do. Super Brawl comes out. It's a good buy rate, 1.1. So it was down from Starrcade, which was 1.9. but it's better than Sold Out, which was the pay-per-view between.
Yeah, but that's not saying much, dude.
Yeah. So it's a 1.1 buy rate.
Does it talk about revenue? Do you have the revenue?
I don't have the
numbers?
revenue numbers, just the buy rate.
Okay, well, boy, we are both striking out in terms of research on this one. Conrad's going to put us both in research
I'm in
jail.
timeout. Yeah. But,
Write 1,000 times. I will do my research before the show. I will do the research before the show.
Hey, listen, we made up for it with all those stats and figures for the Starcades, the 2 Starcades. So maybe we get a pass there.
I'm good with it. I'm good
All
with
right,
it.
cool. Well, Uncensored is up next as we journey through Sting 1998, and it's announced that Sting's going to defend his title against Scott Hall, and coming off the big show like Super Brawl. And by the way, this is a couple weeks, Eric, before Mike Tyson will be in the main event of WrestleMania between Stone Cold and Shawn Michaels. How confident are you in a program with these two here? The goal is you're obviously wanting to keep pressure on WWF right now. So what are you thinking with Hall and Sting going against them?
That's not true, Paulie. People would assume that my goal was to keep pressure on WWF, but I wasn't thinking that way.
Okay.
I was just trying to reach our own internal goals. And I'm going to be honest, when I found out about Tyson, that was the first time that was the first time ever that I was actually concerned about WWE. I was so confident going into 1998. And I had every reason to be. The Tyson thing changed everything. And when I've told the story before, I'll keep it short. I was down in Kissimmee, Florida. I was finishing up some flying lessons. I was getting my private pilot's license at the time. And I went down there to kind of just spend a week just focusing on nothing but flying and taking care of business at night when I had to. But my days, I was pretty much trying to get through that process. And I had just come back from a training flight and touchdown, and I got a page because I still kept a pager. I had a cell phone, but still kept a pager. And I got a page to call Zane Breslov. And I called Zane and from a payphone. And I called Zane and said, man, what's up? Because it was like 911 type of thing. So I called Zane back and he goes, bro, you're never going to guess, man. Now this was a couple months before this, obviously, or a month or two before. And he said, they're bringing in Mike Tyson for a program. Usually Zane would call me and tell me what WWE was doing. And I was like, oh, fuck, whatever, Zane. Cool. I would engage in a conversation. We'd have fun with it as friends. But from a business perspective, nothing they were doing mattered to me because I was focused on my own shit. By that time, I didn't have to beat them up anymore. At that time, I didn't have to be up in anybody's face. I didn't have to give away finishes. I didn't have to do a lot of the stuff that I did starting out because I got the audience to sample me and they stuck around. But when I heard about Tyson, I thought, oh man, that's going to change. We're going to reverse polarity again. It's an electrical term, polarity, I think. The polarization of the dynamics between WCW and WWE were about to shift with Tyson. Definitely. Now, you asked me the question, how confident was I in Sting and Hall?
Yeah.
On paper, 100% confident. Behind the scenes, Hall was a ticking time bomb. You never knew for sure when it was going to go off. You never knew for sure what would show up. I love Scott Hall. He's one of my favorite people. And I wish him nothing but the absolute best because he's got some physical challenges right now. But at that time, and I think Scott would admit, I don't think Scott knew who was going to show up when Scott showed up at the building. So on paper, yes. Behind the scenes, I was pretty nervous.
Well, Eric, speaking of numbers, and I know you said, hey, when Tyson, the news of Tyson broke, you knew the pressure was on, but Nitro still, it's on fire. It sets an all-time record with a 5.1 rating and a 7.49 share.
5.1 rating. Paulie, I don't mean to interrupt you.
That's okay.
But that's roughly 7 million people at that time. But if you listen to the dirt sheets, everything was fucked up. It was horrible. They dropped the ball. There were 7 million people watching WCW. And probably another couple million, 3 or 4, watching WWE.
Listen, it was the main event.
Amazing, dude.
The main event got a 5.5 rating, Luger and Sting. The main event scored a 5.5 rating. Luger and Sting against Hogan and Savage. Now, to be fair, this was the third hour running unopposed against Raw, but
it doesn't
Luger
matter.
and Sting, 5.5. Yeah.
It was also between 10 and 11 o'clock at night on the East Coast, which is a dead zone for television.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I think I'm right. Was this this was a 3-hour show? So
this was a 3-hour show.
Yeah. We're talking and that match probably came up about 10:45 Eastern.
Yeah.
So you're really in the dead zone. And there were still over 7 million people watching that match.
I feel like it's lost that WCW in the beginning of 1998, even though you have the 83-week streaks broken in a couple months, but the company was so red hot, it's ridiculous.
And honestly, when you share those numbers with me, it's mind-boggling to me, and I did it. But it's again, it's just what a great time. What a great time. Mike Tyson coming in, all of the energy that created, the Hogan Sting story saga, even with its flaws, everything that was done between the two companies to elevate and grow the audience. And it was story driven and character driven, both companies, because WWE by this point, and we saw it play out. Mike Tyson, I think, was the pivot point for WWE. That was the most significant and important thing that they had done creatively. And if you go back and look at it and just in a clear-headed way, in an objective way, recognize that was an amazing shift in the WWE business model. That was when they decided, actually it was done, it was publicly announced in November, I think. Vince McMahon came out and said that they were going to change their approach to business.
That's right.
We didn't know what that was, but Vince knew it was time to drop the teen and preteen, approach to their programming and follow in WCW's footsteps and target the 18 to 49-year-old demo, which became so successful for us. And Tyson was the key to doing that. And then they built upon that. The Mr. McMahon character, Stone Cold Steve Austin. My God, that was such an important, and it's WWE. I'm doing Scott Hall and Sting It Uncensored, which I've discussed this with Conrad. It was, I hate to say a throwaway pay-per-view, but we've got a pay-per-view in March, and then there's WrestleMania. Well, guess what all the focus is, people? Yeah, we're going to put on a pay-per-view, but are we going to put everything we have into a pay-per-view that we know no one's really going to be watching? Because during that time of year, the only thing that people were going to spend money on, or to a large degree, was WrestleMania. So you program accordingly, knowing that. But my God, these numbers are just, I'm sorry, I went off on a tangent.
That's okay.
Just hearing these numbers are mind-boggling. And I want to, because people that listen to the show think I'm trying to put myself over all the time, and sometimes I do. But this moment right now in 1998 is one of the most pivotal moments in wrestling, because it was the point in time that WWE decided, fuck it, we're going to go Attitude Era. They might not have called it Attitude Era at the time, but creatively they knew the direction they were going to go. And that's what changed everything for WWE's future.
Well, Eric, too, these numbers also, I know we like to talk about them here, and you and Conrad do as well, but it helps serve as a reminder of just how special and magical this time of the business was. It was an incredible time like we'll never probably see ever again in terms of when you're talking these ratings. It's just incredible. And I know there's a lot of reasons for it now and streaming and this and all that, but still, when you're talking 5.5 of a rating score, that's just unheard of. That's ungodly when it comes to wrestling. That's amazing.
And again, today's audience, most of the people listening to this don't know what 5.5 or 4.9 share means, because Nielsen ratings are now reported in terms of total viewers. So that's what the majority of the people listening to the show are used to hearing, is total viewers. They're not used to hearing ratings. They don't know how to correlate the numbers. But a 5.5, well, let me do a little quick math here. 5.5.
I love it. I'm getting some Bischoff math right here on the show.
7,425,000 people approximately is what we're talking about. compared to what we're seeing today.
Incredible.
Where 2 million or 2.3 million is the high point. And AEW does backflips and talks about, all of the success doing 1 million or 1.2 million. It's just, and again, I understand it. People listening are, yeah, but television's changed and it's streaming. I get it. And it's not incorrect. But there were still far more people watching wrestling that are watching wrestling now, despite the fact that there's more wrestling programming available today and there's more ways to watch it. That should tell you that if you're telling great fucking stories, you're going to get more people to watch it, even if they're watching it on a streaming device. It can be done. And I only get passionate about this because I want to see it happen. I want to see the business grow, and it can be done. I don't think anybody in WWE or AEW or anywhere else should wake up every morning and go, well, yeah, that'll never happen again and take any kind of comfort in whatever excuse that's being thrown at you or makes you feel better about yourself. Don't accept it. It can be done. You just have to figure out how to do it. It's been done before. It can be done again. And I'd love to see that. I don't care if those 7 million viewers on a Monday night, if half of them come from my phone and the other half of them come from television. I don't give a fuck. I just want 7 million people watching wrestling.
That's right.
And by the way, that 7.425 million only represents the people that were watching WCW that night. There had to be another 3 million people out there or 4 watching WWE. We're talking about 10 or 11 million people on a Monday night watching wrestling. You can't get 10 or 11 people watching wrestling over the course of 4 months.
And I think you nailed it, Eric. That's the narrative. It's not, hey, is wrestling hot right now? Absolutely. Social media, yes, wrestling's hot. We're excited. There's 2 major companies we're excited about, but it was wildly much more popular back then. Millions of more people were watching in this day that Eric and I are discussing. And that's all he's getting at when he talks about these millions and millions, as the Rock say, that were tuned in for these shows. It was just an incredible time for the business. So there you go. Well, Eric, we move along because Sting's teaming with Randy Savage, as Savage has begun his split from the NWO, and they're against Hall and Hogan in the main event of Nitro, and it's billed as the first time a WCW wrestler and an NWO wrestler teamed up with each other. But, buddy, there's little to no crowd heat. Do you think it's tough to get a reaction for the baby faces at this point here with the NWO just being so hot?
What city was that in? Do you remember?
This is not, I don't have the location, and I was looking through the notes because I knew that would be the next question, but I don't have the location of that, but it could be related to that as well.
Well, look, you got a tag team. It's harder for the audience to get behind a tag team because the stakes are different. It's, the best scenario, in my opinion, for whatever it's worth, is always to have a focus on 2 people with high stakes. Once you get into a tag match, it can be revenge, it can be a lot of things, but the stakes just don't feel the same. And I think if there was a lack of reaction, I would guess it would be because it was a tag match and not a singles match with high stakes, number one, because they hadn't really accepted Randy as a part of WCW. They weren't really buying into that. I think that's a part of it. I think there may have been an expectation that Randy was going to turn on Sting, and I don't think anybody would have wanted to see that happen. So I think there was probably a lot of variables there that would account for a lack of crowd reaction if indeed there was one.
Well, buddy, listen, you guys weren't done setting records because another record is set on Nitro when Sting, the Giant, and Randy Savage team up to take on the Outsiders and Hulk Hogan as 4,188,000 homes are watching. Even with the crowd reaction being down, TV ratings being up is certainly a good thing for a television company, as you've stated. It's just incredible.
It was a fun time. God, I wish I could go back there. Of course, I kind of do doing this show. It's, the closest I'm going to get is going back and revisiting it and a lot of this stuff I'm hearing for the first time, and some of it, although I knew it, I forgot about it. So
Well, and
Yeah.
you're in the moment at the time. You're churning and burning. You're running. You're doing the shows. You're putting on the events, and it's not a lot of time to sit back and look and go through all this type of stuff. But man,
Nope.
what a wild time. It's also reported in the Observer that Sting is scheduled to start back on the road in late April. Eric, do you remember this at all? Is this a Sting call at this point in his career?
No, it wouldn't have been a Sting call. It would have been normal course of business. I mean, Sting had been, that spooky character for a long time. Now he's back on the active roster, and we're still touring. And guess what? So will Sting. It was not a big discussion point, or there was no argument or negotiation. It was normal course of business.
Okay. Well, it's uncensored. Sting gets the win clean as a sheet over Scott Hall, but it's not in the main event. It's underneath Hogan versus Savage. Thoughts on the world title not being in the main event in this one?
A mistake. Don't know how else to say it. In retrospect, I know at that time, having Hulk Hogan in the main event still mattered. It mattered a lot to our pay-per-view distributors who weren't following storylines, by the way. They didn't give a shit. What they did care about is who's on the card and where, because that's how they determine how much promotion they're going to give things. They're going to promote events that they have the highest confidence in, and they'll promote events less that they don't have confidence in. And for the pay-per-view companies, having Hulk Hogan in the main event provided a lot of confidence, which means they would promote us more. So that was the reason from a business perspective, but from a creative perspective, and probably even one could argue a long-term kind of strategy, it was a mistake.
And when you think about it, it is Hogan Savage, right? So you get those two names on the marquee, and the goal is they're going to draw again, right?
No, let me explain that a little bit, because I glossed over a little bit from the weeds perspective, so to speak. Pay-per-view represented roughly, I'm estimating here, I don't have numbers in front of me, probably 25 to 35%, maybe more, of WCW's total revenue. Probably more, probably closer to 40% at that time. And we had a budget to promote our pay-per-views. The majority of our promotion took place on the shows itself, for obvious reasons, because that's where our audience was. But we did have a pretty significant budget to advertise in USA Today, for example, or to buy radio in key pay-per-view markets. Those are things that we would do. But the vast majority of the promotion, a good majority of the promotion, came from DirecTV, Dish, the people that were providing the pay-per-view, because they're pushing it out to their audience, not only within wrestling, but within non-wrestling. So we were very dependent on that relationship. And when I said earlier, well, one of the reasons we would have put Hogan Savage in the main event is to keep the pay-per-view companies excited so that they would give us promotion, particularly going into WrestleMania season. Now, again, I'm not saying that it was a good idea. In the long term, I think it was a bad idea and it was a mistake, as I said. But there is a reason for it that goes beyond a dirt sheet analysis. You can still argue it was a mistake, and I'd accept that. In fact, I admit it. But there's a reason for it, folks. It wasn't arbitrary, or more importantly, it wasn't because that's what Hogan wanted, because that's what Dave Meltzer would want people to think, or because Eric Bischoff had his nose up Hogan's ass, or whatever kind of negative narrative that people would come up with. It wasn't that. There was a business reason behind it. And you can, like I said, you can argue the business reason, but there was a reason.
Nah, thank you for the clarity on that. And it makes sense when you think about Hogan Savage, name on the marquee, WrestleMania season, and all the business that goes behind it. Eric, after this uncensored pay-per-view, the next night, you're on to Panama City, and it's Nitro, and Sting comes down from a helicopter after you on the air make mention, hey, there's no rafters. He's not coming out of the air here. Well, he does. And I bring this up, Eric, because Sting recently wrote an article for the Players Tribune, And really, everyone needs to go out of their way to read it. It's tremendous. I don't know if you got to see that or hear about it, Eric. It's incredible.
I did. I didn't read the entire story because it's a story, but I did read about half of it.
I mention it because I'm going to read an excerpt from that because he brings this Panama Beach Nitro up specifically. So I'm going to read this for you and for the audience. He said, "This time we're in Panama Beach for a special spring break edition of Nitro, and there's no rafters. There's no roof. They put on the whole show at an outdoor beach club right in the middle of all the spring break madness. So there's no way that Sting is coming down from the heavens to haunt the NWO tonight, right? Shivani is selling it. Bischoff is selling it. Hogan is selling it. He's on the microphone taunting the fans. There's no way Sting is showing up tonight, brother." That's right. When the helicopter starts circling the ring, the wind starts to pick up and everyone's hair starts blowing. Bischoff literally flies out of the ring and 10,000 people look up into the sky at the same time. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's Sting. I can't even do the Shivani voice. And I'll never forget that feeling, that sound. The helicopter starts descending and I'm slowly rappelling down into the ring, and Hogan and Macho Man are the size of peanuts, and they're pointing up into the sky in disbelief. The roar of the fans is coming up, and the roar of the helicopter blades is coming down. And it was like all of the sound met in the middle, and I couldn't even hear myself think. I felt like a real-life superhero, even in the Marvel movies. If you're Captain America, there's a stunt double, right? There's CGI. There's no live audience losing their minds, but I actually got to wear the cape. I actually got to save the day. I had money, I had fame, I had power. I had an amazing family waiting for me at home. I had everything earthly that you could ever want. And you know what? I was completely and utterly miserable. I was spiritually empty. I was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. I was an addict. The only time I was sober was when I was doing my job. The other 20-some hours of the day, it was a steady diet of painkillers, muscle relaxers, and booze, a never-ending cycle. It was only a matter of time before I was dead. I knew it. But the physical and mental addiction to the opioids was so intense at that point that stopping was unthinkable. Wow, Eric, did you know at this time that he was going through all this? And does it make more sense as you hear that, knowing this really wasn't the best time of his life at all whatsoever?
That was amazing, first of all. And I'm really glad that Sting shared that. Because he's proven by example that you can go from that despair and those challenges and come out of it a healthier, happier, better human being. That's why I say I'm grateful that he shared it. I didn't know the extent of what was going on with Steve, but I don't be really careful how I say this. Back when Conrad and I did the Starrcade 98 or 97 episode, and Conrad was busting my balls for the finish, and I danced around a lot of stuff as to why the finish was changed and what took place during those discussions. And I was very careful about what I said with regard to Sting. And I threw out there, I think, I said, so you can just tell that, he wasn't really ready. He wasn't really prepared. He didn't even bother to, tan. Well, that became the big thing. Oh, Sting didn't get the title, didn't get the shot. They changed the finish because Sting wasn't tan. That's a typical dirt sheet narrative, right? Or social media narrative, I think is a better way to say it. Because it's something everybody can grab onto and have fun with and hate on and all that kind of shit.
Yeah.
But when I said I could tell that Sting wasn't ready, that's what I meant. And Sting, and I wasn't about to say anything publicly. Sting chose to. But that point in time that we're talking about now in March of 98, it didn't just happen within 90 days. It had been an issue for quite some time. So it had nothing to do with the tan, folks. But I did not know. I knew he was having problems because Sting and I were pretty close up until probably mid 97, late 97. There was just more distance created between us, partly because I didn't see Steve as much, and partly because of what was going on with Steve's life. I didn't know the extent of it until I just heard what you read me. But I said to Conrad when we did that podcast, it's not my story to tell. It's not my place to discuss what was going on with Steve Borden or Sting, the character. But I think Steve Borden shed a little bit of light on that in that story.
He absolutely did. He shared it. It's out there now. And I think, too, what he's done is it's inspiring, right? For those that are maybe not necessarily dealing with this exact same thing, but maybe going through, whether it's mental, emotional, addiction problems, whatever the case may be, this guy was on top of the world. He, what appears to all of us as fans, had it all. But as you could hear in those words, he was empty. He said, I was spiritually empty, completely miserable. And again, I tell you what, it just makes his story now so much sweeter, realizing what he's come from. But again, too, it adds validity to your decision and where you are with Starrcade 97. And it shows the amount of respect that you have for Steve, not wanting to go there. But now that Sting has and shared, it makes complete sense. So thank you for talking about that.
And I want to be clear, man, it was part of it. It wasn't all of it. There were other things going on. It had nothing to do with Steve Borden or any of his challenges. It was part of it. There's never for me, there's never been one thing that defines my decision. It's usually a combination of things. Listen up, muckerfuthers. If you just can't get enough of 83 Weeks, we've got tons more waiting for you over at adfreeshows.com. Bonus episodes, all the archives with zero, yes, I said zero ads. Plus, we've got interactive events and experiences with yours truly. You can ask me anything, chat one-on-one during our live Locked and Loaded events. Do yourself a favor. Right now, Google the internet, and you won't find a better value in all of wrestling. Come on, man, you can't beat it. Join the family today at adfreeshows.com.
Well, as we move on from there, Nitro there, Sting is scheduled to have his first title defense on television, and it's used as an experiment. He's scheduled to take on DDP at the beginning of the second hour to combat Raw starting, and it works, as when Raw starts, it normally takes a full ratings point from Nitro, but this time it actually climbs to a 5.4. Sting does get the win, but the real win is in the ratings, isn't it? This is big time.
What were the final ratings? Do you remember? Do you have a comparison? Derek. Come on, Derek.
Just have the 5.4 that it climbed to. So there you go.
Okay. Still, and I don't know what WWE did that night, but let's assume it was close. Exciting night of wrestling television on Monday nights, man. Cool shit.
But I love the experimentation there. You were always willing to try something new just to see what would work. Man. You had to, yeah.
You have to. You can't just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting it to, an outcome that's different. I mean, you've got to mix it up, especially when you're doing, 52 weeks a year, 2 hours a night, 3 hours a night, or a week, prime time for one show. You can't just use the same formula. You've got to mix it up in order to find out what works. Some things you try and they don't work and you go, okay, well, let's not do that again. Other things you try, even though people don't think it's a good idea, and you do it and it works. And then you add that to the list of the things that you can put in your arsenal and use at a later date. But you have to try.
The match was so good, Eric, that Meltzer even called it Sting's best match in forever. Was there ever a point where you thought to yourself, finally, the Sting we need is back? And I'm talking about the full character, in-match quality, the whole 9 yards?
No, because I never really thought he left.
Okay.
I mean, the scary Sting character was a different character with a different energy and brought something different to the table. We missed that, high energy Surfer Sting kind of character in some respects, but there was no going back to that. There was just a different version of it. And I think what we're seeing is that different version. And I never looked at the ups. Well, there really weren't any downs. I never looked at the changes in Sting from a television perspective as, boy, we need to fix this, or, oh man, I wish I could get that back. I think what we saw in this particular match was the transition of that. Okay, Sting's back. We got it. And the story allowed him to have more of that familiar Sting vibe that we used to see than the Crow character did. That character couldn't get all fired up. He wasn't going to come out there and express emotion the way this Sting could because he'd gone through the story.
Well, Eric, Nash and Savage would beat Sting and Luger on a Nitro in Chicago at the United Center when Brutus Beefcake, the disciple, hits the stunner on Luger to give Nash the win. Meltzer would report that Sting hurt his hip during the match. And so there you go. That, I don't know if you recall the hip injury or not.
I do not.
But on the 83rd week, Nitro would win its streak, and that has the main event of Sting versus Kevin Nash, and it's the most watched match up until that point, with head-to-head competition with 4.2 million homes watching. That's big time, isn't it?
Crazy.
It's also reported in The Observer there was actually tremendous backstage heat late in the week because of the feeling that Sting wasn't really hurt and was trying to take some time off, citing that he played 18 holes of golf when he was supposed to be hurting so bad. Do you remember any of this? Is this more Meltzer fiction or?
I don't remember any of that. And let me just say that was Sting. That was not Sting. I've never had that experience with Sting. If he needed time off, he would just come and ask for it and we'd work around it. He was never that guy, ever. Not with me.
Well, Eric, the next week, this is it. This show was built on 83 weeks. This is week 84. Nitro loses to Raw for the first time when Steve Austin and Vince McMahon are scheduled to wrestle in the main event of Raw in Philly. And that match actually would never happen. That was the whole build. The Nitro counter, a rematch of Sting and Kevin Nash from the week before. What do you think about that? Do you think Sting being champion led to the loss of the streak, or do you just think it's a rematch? Or is it just all Austin McMahon?
It had everything to do with Tyson, Austin, McMahon. When I said earlier, and I went off on that rant about how 98 was so important to WWE and how Mike Tyson was the catalyst and the pivot point. There you go. It's playing out right before our eyes in 1998 with this particular episode.
What a sad day it is, but my goodness.
That wasn't sad for me. It wasn't. I mean, that motivated me. I love fighting from underneath. I love being the underdog. That's a really comfortable place for me to be. I like having my back up against the wall. When I used to compete in kickboxing, I didn't really find my gear until after I got kicked in the head once or twice. Then everything changed for me, and I enjoyed the hell out of it a lot more. But I just love that, man. I don't mind getting kicked in the head and having to fight my way back. I like it. And I liked it back then. So I didn't look at it as sad. People won't walk around going, oh, my God, I can't believe it.
They beat us.
Oh, what do we do? Oh, my God. There was none of that going on. It was, all right, now we're in a fight. We just got kicked in the head. Let's get back in this. Come on.
I like it. If anything, it reignites a fire.
It did.
We got to get our shit together. There you go. I like it. Well, Randy Savage has a torn ACL, Eric, but he's going into Spring Stampede in a title match against Sting, and he wins the belt. He captured the WCW title from Sting in 10 minutes and 8 seconds. So a lot going on here. We're giving this title to Savage, who has a bad knee. We're taking it off of Sting. In the match, Hogan and Nash interfered. Why now is it time to take the belt off Sting?
we needed a change in direction. We needed to try to find a way to re-energize. Here's the tough part about having the belt on a babyface, and there are exceptions. Hulk Hogan was one of them for a long time. Having the belt on a babyface is a tough spot for a company that's trying to build and grow and compete. It's okay for a while, but the real magic is in the chase. The real magic is watching your babyface overcome challenges to achieve that goal. Once they've achieved that goal, it's a little harder to keep that level of passion alive, because what is the audience rooting for? They're rooting not to lose as opposed to rooting to win. And rooting to win comes with a lot more emotion and commitment than rooting not to lose.
Well said by you there, Eric. Eric, this is also the time that the NWO Wolfpac is formed between Kevin Nash, Randy Savage, and Conan. And Sting ends up challenging Nash and Savage for a World Tag Team title match. How is Savage doing it with all these knee injuries? It's just incredible. He just continues to work with a torn ACL.
Randy was such a pro, and he was tougher than nails. And he never wanted to admit if he was hurt. There were often issues with Randy that he wouldn't share. He was kind of old school that way. You never let anybody know you were hurt because you might not get booked again. So you worked through your injuries. That was a big part of the culture back in Randy's day as he was coming up, and even in WWE and in WWF when he was there. But that was, and more than that, I think, that was true to a degree. But I think beyond that, it's just Randy being tough and being Randy. He just didn't want to stop.
It's reported in the Observer right around this time, in breaking news at this time, that Hogan suggested turning Sting heel, and Sting refused. Meltzer said Sting refused to turn heel, which was Hogan's idea, since Hogan figures he needs a top guy to do tag matches with against Hall, Nash, Savage, etc. Sting probably didn't want to make the switch because it would kill his merchandise sales, although the marketing of the Goldberg stuff has resulted in that happening anyway. So was Sting upset that Goldberg's merchandise was getting hot and cutting into his? Is any of this narrative true?
No, but I've already spent too much time talking about Dirt Sheet Dave, so I'm going to skip it. I'll just answer the question. No, none of it was true.
All right.
Could there have been a discussion about turning Sting heel? Absolutely. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you have all creative options on the table and discuss them if they made a little bit of sense? But it was not an issue, and it wasn't anything that was discussed seriously.
Well, Eric, we move on to Slamboree, and Sting is now tagging with the Giant, and they win the tag belts in what was voted by the Wrestling Observer readers as the worst match on the show over Hall and Nash when Hall turns on Nash. It is the main event of the show, but it's just a flat ending to the show, according to the Observer. Don't know if you recall that matchup at all, but doesn't sound like it was received very well from
no build up for it.
Yeah.
There was no story to it. It was a moment. It wasn't a story. There was no anticipation. There was no reality. There just weren't the elements of the story to make it interesting. It was a hotshot move. It's really what it was. It's hotshot creative. I know, we'll do this week. That'll work. That's not a story.
Right. And then we move on to the next night on Nitro. The Giant joins NWO Hollywood and calls out Sting in the main event to make a decision if he would join and stay a champion with him. Sting spits at the Giant and gets jumped by the NWO before Nash makes the save. Do you think this makes the tag titles look like shit in your mind, Eric?
Didn't do them any good, did it? They were just being used as a backdrop.
A prop, if you will.
Yep. No stakes. Nobody cared about the characters, but the tag titles were incidental to the story.
And there's a lot of movement too going on here. We're talking about the Wolfpac going on, people flip flopping and joining right now. Next up, Lex Luger, he joins the Wolfpac. the week on Nitro, and teams with Sting in the main event to take on a returning Hollywood Sting and the Giant. Sting gets the pin over NWO Sting, so we have NWO Sting back, and the show goes off the air with Sting being offered a Wolfpac shirt. Is this the only way you think as far as freshening up his character at this point? Let's make him, Wolfpac here.
It was an easy go-to creatively, but it was a huge mistake. And this is where we're now getting into the time. So let's talk about what was going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, let's do that.
We got Thunder coming up pretty quick in 98. I don't remember what month we premiered Thunder, but a lot of our creative resources were now being jumbled, and I had to figure out how we're going to do this Thunder show and Nitro. And oh, by the way, I had to figure out how I'm going to pay for this fucking show out of my own budget because TBS didn't want to, which is mind-boggling. I had a lot of my own issues internally with WCW because budgets were beginning to get reallocated. I was being asked to do things that I knew were not the right things to do for WCW by people who were senior to me in Turner Broadcasting. This is the beginning of the end. It progressively got worse in 98. It really became clear to me that I had a problem in probably July or August of 98. But the months leading up to that were getting really, really weird and taking up more and more of my time. And now add on top of that, WWE is coming back strong. Now I know they're real again. Now they're coming after me the same way I went after WWE, very aggressively. So between everything that was going on behind the scenes, and by the way, I encourage people, I know I plug this book a lot, but Guy Evans literally wrote the book on what was going on behind the scenes in Turner Broadcasting as well as WCW from the vantage point of some of the key executives much senior to me in the company at the time. And I really encourage people to find that book, because if you really want to understand what was going on in 1998, particularly in WCW and Turner Broadcasting, and what I was going through, that book does a phenomenal job. But, even in March and April, the wheels were beginning to wobble, as I say. They hadn't fallen off yet, but I started to feel that shake in my front end because the wheels were just starting to wobble a bit.
Yeah, it seemed like you were trying to pull all the right levers or find what was going to be a hit, and there was a lot going on creatively. But just to mention what you said, Eric, Guy Evans in the book, if you are a subscriber at adfreeshows.com, if you're not, I encourage you to go do that. We had Guy Evans on a while ago for book club, and he came on and answered all of our members' questions. And I tell you what, if you join, you can dig back through the archives and listen to that. It was an incredible time. He's very well spoken, and it was just an incredible interview with him. And he provided a lot of insight that wasn't even in the book. So I can't put that over enough.
Yep. Did a great job.
So listen, Sting does join the Wolfpac after coming out in the NWO Hollywood shirt to swerve Hogan. And do you remember who pulled the trigger creatively to say, hey, let's put Sting in the Wolfpac? And was anybody against it?
Collaborative, I'm sure. Kevin Sullivan would have been in the middle of it. I would have been in the middle of it. Hulk, Kevin, Scott, Sting, everybody would have had a contribution. Nobody just showed up and said, okay, what do you want me to do today? And I'll go do it. It's not how that process worked. So it would have been a collaborative effort led primarily by Kevin, Sullivan, and or me to some degree. And then again, input from everybody else involved.
It really was. It was a fun time, I guess. It would be the first time he smiled in what seemed like 2 years wearing his Wolfpac shirt on TV. And along with the Wolfpac shirt came red face paint. And it was a really fresh paint of coat, as Bruce would say. Wouldn't you say, Eric?
It was a change in direction.
Yeah.
We were hoping that change in direction would kind of reignite some of the passion for the product.
Well, it's Sting versus the Giant, and that's the main event at the Great American Bash in a singles match, and the winner gets the WCW tag team titles. So there we go. It's a tag team title match defended in a singles match.
How fucking weird was that?
That's weird, man.
I mean, that may be one of the dumbest things I've ever done. And I've got a big list of stupid shit that I've done. It's not a short list, folks.
Yeah.
It's not like Jericho's list, but it's a pretty substantial list. But this would have to be right up there. If not the number one stupid thing I've ever done creatively, had to get an honorable mention for number one.
Yeah, man, it's got to be. Just to think we're going to defend tag titles in a singles match. Yeah. Here, where do I sign off on that one? This sounds
God.
Yeah, great idea.
What an idiot.
Well, Sting gets the win and he gets the tag titles. And he also gets to announce who his partner is on Nitro. And but what did you think about the dynamic of Sting and the Giant in the ring working together?
From a execution perspective, a ton of confidence. Paul was amazing. Paul was a pro. Well, still relatively green, right? Didn't have a decade of experience coming into this.
That's right.
So he was still relatively new, but was ahead of his time, ahead of his years in terms of experience. He had more experience than he should have had at that point. That's a credit to Paul. Sting, the ultimate team player, and incredibly gifted as a performer in the ring. So there was no problem with the execution. We expected it to be good. It was good, but the problem is with a character like Paul. I've talked about it before. How does a guy who is as big and powerful and has demonstrated it so many times previously, how do you get heat on him? Where's his flaw? Where's his vulnerability? It's tough to do it in a believable way. It's tough to book a guy like Paul. Kevin Nash, same thing, not to the same extent because Kevin wasn't quite as big as Paul, but he's still almost 7 foot, over 325, 350 pounds, whatever he weighed when he was at his peak back then. It's hard to book giants like that. It really is. Because unless they're just totally dominating their opponent, kind of hard to believe in it.
You mentioned that he was green around this time, didn't have that decade of experience behind him. And not only that, you would hear that around this time, he would no-show a house in Pittsburgh. That's definitely not the Paul White that we've come to know at this point. But Sting decides, hey, I'm going to step up. I'm going to put over Goldberg in a 3-minute match. According to the Observer, it was Sting's idea. He volunteered to do it to save the situation after the Giant messed around with his flights and couldn't make the show. When you hear something like this, does this talk to the professionalism and the type of leader that Sting was?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like an illustration of what I was saying a little while ago. Sting is the ultimate team player. This Sting is the guy you want on your team. We're seeing it now in AEW. Look what he did for Darby Allin. I think he put Darby Allin on the map.
Absolutely.
I think I voted for Darby Allin as newcomer of the year in Sportskeeda, largely because of his story in association with Sting and how that elevated him in a really positive way. But that's Steve Borden, the person.
And you just heard it right here on 83 Weeks. Eric Bischoff is supporting AEW, and he supported Darby Allin. So there you go. It's not all bad.
I have my moments.
You do. Come on now. Listen, what was Sting and Goldberg's relationship, though, Eric, around this time? Did you know?
Really
were
good.
They really good? Okay.
Really, tons of mutual respect. And they enjoyed each other's company. But it couldn't have been more positive from what I saw. I mean, they may have a different opinion on that, but from what I saw, they were
from your chair. They were getting along.
They were tight.
Yeah.
They were tight.
Well, Goldberg, speaking of Goldberg, this is around the time where he beats Hogan for the title at the Georgia Dome, and Meltzer brings this up afterwards. The current plans are for Goldberg to keep the title for the time being and not to do a quickie back to Hogan because of the feeling that Goldberg could be the man in the business and to not screw it up as they did Sting. Okay, and he goes on and says, and truthfully, a lot of that problem just wasn't the way the Hogan feud was booked, but because Sting himself had no fire in the ring when he returned. How big a difference are these two scenarios, and did you ever think you and Dave would be on the same side of this argument regarding Sting and Starrcade?
I would have to say no. I try not to be on the same side of Dave Meltzer on anything, because more often than not, his opinion, his philosophy, his view of the wrestling business is so wrong that when I was active in the business, if we were heading in a direction and Dave buried it, I knew we were going in the right direction. And if Dave agreed with what we were doing, I knew we probably had a problem. So I never aspired to be the dirt sheet booker of the year. If anything, I used Dave's opinion to help guide me, but not in the way that most people would think.
Yeah, it was like, oh, let's do it opposite. Okay.
Oh my God, we're fucking up here. Dave's writing good shit. Oh, we better change that.
Well, Eric, Bash at the Beach 98 would come and go, and Sting was not on that show at all. I don't know if you recall as to why, but he just wouldn't be on that show. Well, then 2 weeks later on Nitro, it's Sting and Nash. They drop the tag team titles to Giant and Hall when Bret Hart interferes. Here we go. Here comes Bret to help Giant and Hall get the win. Are you excited about Bret Hart versus Sting? We got the Battle of the Sharpshooter versus the Scorpion Deathlock.
Yeah, at this point, I was excited about a lot of things that we could do with Bret. Again, Thunder was coming up, Bret and Sting, being a part of the WCW friend, and that's why I bought Bret in. I mean, that was the reason Bret got the payday he got, was because of the pressure that Thunder was about to put on our roster. And the ability to keep talent exclusive to their respective brands, if you will. We didn't call them brands back then. We just call them shows, but now they're brands. Because it's cooler, right? It sounds way more sophisticated to call something
a brand. Nice buzzword.
Yeah, buzzwords are great. We all love buzzwords. But yeah, there was a ton of potential on the table with Bret, and because Bret never been in WCW, like Hogan. There's a world of opportunity that came with Bret.
Well, Sting would appear with white paint randomly on Nitro to team with Bret Hart. The Observer would have this to say, and your name is mentioned right here. I can't wait. Seems Sting is still Wolfpac, but the mean, dangerous Sting comes from the ceiling in black and white. The dual personality Sting is actually a Bischoff idea copied from the success of the Great Muta in Japan. Is this where you got it from?
No, absolutely not. And can't deny that there's a parallel there, but to suggest that I'm copying an idea or that was the inspiration, it was an evolution of what Sting was doing. It was Sting constantly trying to change up and morph out of that spooky Sting character into something different and more interesting as a babyface, and coming out of that dark, scary crow character, but it had nothing to do with Muta. Oh God.
Well, from the Observer regarding that Nitro, the legit heat with Kevin Nash that he has with Hogan and Bischoff reached a new level during and after this television show. Nash apparently believes, and the booking does bear this out, that they are doing everything to make the Wolfpac look bad, and apparently Nash wasn't aware of what they were doing with Sting until it happened. Some would say it's almost poetic justice because Wolfpac is simply this year's version of the Four Horsemen in the same face spot, made to look impotent against the heels, even though they are over with the crowd. Nash was supposed to do an interview on the show and refused when he found out Wolfpac was going to be the whipping boys on the show, that the members wouldn't be helping each other out when getting beaten on in angles, making the unit look bogus, similar to what happened with the Horsemen, and that the pay-per-view match was just to set up Goldberg and Giant's issue, and he'd again simply be background to get others over. So this long-rumored political heat between you and Nash and Hogan, was it ever as bad as was reported, or do you remember these situations being messy. Talk to us about this.
Wow, it's hard to even cover all that. I mean, so much. Again, it's just the way he writes is just mind-numbingly stupid. I'll try to break it into pieces and address it. Heat between Bischoff and Nash. I guess I would need to know what he meant by heat between us. Were there moments when Kevin and I would get into an intense, heated discussion? Sure. Fairly regular basis. And then we go have a beer when it was over. So it's just a normal course of business. You're in a creative business. It's intense. You got competition now that we hadn't had in some time. Real competition. The stakes were higher. There were other things going on that complicated life in WCW. And as a result, yeah, there were times when Kevin and I and others creatively would have issues with each other, but it would last for 20 minutes or an hour or maybe even an evening until the show was over and then we went to the hotel bar and grabbed a bite to eat and a beer and talked it through. So I don't know how to respond to that. Heat between Hogan and Nash, sure, for the same reason. Occasionally it would happen, but I would say 90% of the time, because of the respect and the relationship we all had, that it was just a flare-up. It was like something that would happen in your family. It wasn't like we didn't talk to each other during the week or we didn't want to be around each other. It was the opposite of that. But it was a tough time. I've talked long and hard. By the time you're talking about now in July and August of 1998, my life was a fucking mess. It was getting really ugly. Things were changing in such a negative way within Turner Broadcasting, and it rolled downhill to WCW as it rolled downhill to a lot of different divisions within Turner Broadcasting. I wasn't alone. Again, read Guy Evans' book. You can believe me. You could not believe me. You could probably not even be sure whether you should or not, which is probably the case for most people. But read Guy's book because you hear it coming from the executives above me who were there at the time. But it manifested about this time at WCW as a lot of confusion, a lot of disorientation creatively, bad communication, if I didn't mention that already. It was a tough time. It was one of the most miserable times of my professional career. In fact, about this same time was a period of time where I went home from WCW, and I got home one night from work, and I took Lori out to eat. I said, I think I'm going to quit. I got tons of time left on my deal, but this is not going to work. What I'm being asked to do under the conditions I'm being asked to do it under is not going to work. And I didn't want that on my hands. I didn't want to be the guy in charge when shit hit the fan. And I could see it coming. And I talked myself out of quitting. I've talked about this before. I think I talked about it in my book. I got invited to a meeting. I sat in that meeting. I looked around the room at the people who were above me telling me how I should run my business creatively now. I'm not talking about from a management perspective. They had every right to do that. But from a creative perspective, they had no right because they didn't even understand wrestling. They didn't understand WCW. They knew nothing about it. They didn't want to know anything about it. They just wanted me to change it to fit what they thought was best. And I got home from that meeting and I told Lori, this is not going to work. But regrettably, it's one of the few regrets I really have, I guess, is I wish I would have walked away because things would have ended up much differently for me personally, and I think for WCW.
Well, Eric, right around this time as well, while you're dealing with all this and you're dealing with your own emotions and things and what's going on there, and we're talking about dealing with Kevin Nash and Hogan and all the storylines in the company, Sting would literally sign a new 7-figure contract, and he no longer wants to work on Thursdays. This is according to the Observer. Was that part of those contract negotiations? Do you remember?
No. I don't know where that would have come from.
Okay.
I can't even imagine somebody fed him that. It's abstract. Sting didn't want to work on Thursday since fucking when? Since the beginning of my professional time with Sting, was there ever a conversation about what night of the week he wanted to work on? No. Silliness.
And when you hear the numbers, it doesn't really make sense that he would think he would have to work on Thursdays. So thanks to a couple lawsuits WCW had filed against them, we did find the contract in the research. Sting for 1998 earned $936,190 in payroll, $85,000 in licensing, $43,000 in merch for a total of $1,064,940. His new contract was due to start January 1st of 99. And it include a $100,000 signing bonus, and the base pay for the next 2 years was $1.5 million, with a max of 175 days a year.
What about Thursday? Did they say except for Thursday?
Anything about Thursday? Not in our research. No.
Meltzer is such a.
Yep.
I mean, and the people that still support him, because I get it on my social media all the time. You know, it's mind numbing how ignorant some people are to actually believe this guy has any credibility or inside knowledge. It's just ridiculous. So, yeah, he got his $1.5 million contract, 175 days, which was typical, by the way. That wasn't more or less than anybody else. And we didn't exclude Thursdays, despite Dave Meltzer's reporting on the issue.
Talk about negotiating with Sting, Eric. Did he use an agent? What did that process look like for dealing with him?
I don't know if Sting ever brought an agent into it or not. Something tells me that he may have used Barry Bloom or not. I don't know. And the reason I don't know is because it was so smooth. There were no issues. Sting wasn't greedy. He was realistic in his expectations. He deserved what he was asking for, and I was anxious to give it to him. So I'm not sure if he had an agent or not, because the agent wouldn't have had to intercede much.
They also reported that the production company Jason Hervey's mother is an integral part of, wants to develop a movie for Sting. Do you remember anything about that at this time?
Jason Hervey's mother didn't have a production company, so I don't know where that came from. Jason Hervey's mother was a casting agent, not a movie producer. So I can't comment on anything other than that fact. The rest of it is dirt sheet nonsense.
But you don't remember anything about a potential Sting movie?
In 98, there was a movie that I fully supported. I think it was called The Real Reason Men Commit Crimes. The producer, I don't remember his name, but he was based in Atlanta. And Sting had been studying acting and was interested in getting involved and wanted to break into movies. Obviously, we had TNT and TBS. TNT primarily was the movie platform, more so than TBS. But I supported that, but Jason Hervey's mother had nothing to do with that. I don't know where that came from. Again, if you're a dirt sheet writer, you just fucking connect him with a bunch of shit you make up, and hopefully nobody knows the difference.
Right. Just drop a few important names and some titles, and
then make up the stuff in the middle.
Yeah.
Make up the shit in the middle, and you too could be a dirt sheet writer.
You too could have your own report and observer. Well, we get to Sting versus Goldberg. And this is a big match, man. It's put out as the main event on Nitro the night after War Games and goes head-to-head against Steve Austin versus Ken Shamrock. Goldberg gets the win after Hulk Hogan interferes to help Goldberg. But, man, this is a pretty damn good singles match for Goldberg. It goes 8 minutes. This is a far cry from the 2 to 3 minute squash matches that he would typically have. So what do you think? Goldberg and Sting, they had a fun little match here.
Yeah, they did. And I remember that matchup. And this is the beginning of Goldberg now having to kind of evolve into a guy that could do more than just go eat people, and add some depth to his character and add some tools to his arsenal, or weapons to his arsenal. And it was a fun time, but it was a little stressful because now we're changing his character too, right? He's going from, a dominating man-eating machine to now a guy that's going to have some flaws and you got to be able to get heat on him. You got to be able to tell different types of stories in the ring with him than up until that point he had to tell. So it put a lot of pressure on Bill, put a lot of pressure on the people Bill worked with. And there was a fair amount of pressure on all of us from a business perspective because you didn't know for sure what you're going to get or how good it was going to be. Was it going to be taking a step back from a character that we had previously fallen in love with, or was it going to actually build upon that character? You don't know till you try.
Well, Eric, here we go. It's September 28th. We're moving on, and we would see Sting take on Hollywood Hogan when Bret Hart completes his heel turn to join the NWO and get the program between these two finally jump-started. Bret wrote in his book he wasn't excited to be turned heel, imagine that, and thought it was stupidity or sabotage. Do you think Sting got the sense from Bret that he was unhappy at all?
Oh, I don't know. Only Sting could answer that. I don't speak for other people. I don't know. I can't imagine he didn't sense it. Bret was a guy that, while in my experience, I don't know what Bret was like at WWF, but in my experience, Bret was, he wasn't going to come to you in an emotional frame of mind or even come to you and say, look, we need to talk about what we're doing here because I'm not feeling good. He never forced himself. He was more passive aggressive is not the right way to say it. He was more subtle, but he was easy to read. He might as well have been yelling and screaming because to me, it was obvious when Bret wasn't happy. And I would imagine that Sting probably sensed the same thing, but I don't know. Sting would know that, not me.
Well, Sting and Bret continue to battle it out. They finally, on a go-home nitro before Halloween Havoc, they go 4 minutes, and the match ends when Bret grabs the ropes while in the Scorpion Deathlock, and Sting refuses to break. Did you know why the logic here would be to have Sting and Bret face off on TV to close it out instead of right before the actual pay-per-view?
I honestly, I can't remember, what the rationale behind that was. I really don't. I will say this. My primary interest was still television because I was working for a television company whose primary interest was television. Despite what the dirt sheet narrative is and social media narrative is, Turner Broadcasting at the time was much more interested in ratings and audience than they were in revenue. Revenue was important. Not going to suggest it wasn't. But the revenue was there in 1998. Revenue was not an issue in 1998. Ratings were becoming one. So if I had to make a decision between holding off for a pay-per-view or doing what I could to make my bosses happy, I would do what I had to do to make my bosses happy. That was the priority.
Well, Eric, they would face off each other at Halloween Havoc. Bret would retain the U.S. title, pinning Sting in 15 minutes, 4 seconds. Started slow, never really picked up, according to Meltzer. But Sting would be sent off on a stretcher at the end of this match. He was out for 6 months after this, so it had to be a statement job. But, wow, he was taken out on a stretcher. Did you know that at this time it was going to be Sting's send-off, if you will? No, and I'm trying to remember the circumstances surrounding that. And again, my memory is pretty good. I've been doing this show for 4 years. Occasionally I come across things like, I have to check on that because I honestly don't remember. Oftentimes when questions are posed to me that I may not remember, it's because I wasn't involved with them. Sure.
I have no memory of it because I wasn't a part of it necessarily. But this is one where I'd really have to try to go back and talk to a few people to get a handle on what was going on. Again, no excuse. I'm not making an excuse for myself, but people who are listening to this, people who weren't in WCW in the office, I'm not talking about talent. They didn't have a fucking clue what was going on in Turner Broadcasting. They did not have a clue ever. None of them were involved. none of the talent that have commented so much about business in WCW and Turner Broadcasting knew who anybody was in management other than Ted Turner. They just had opinions. But there was so much going on for me personally at this time that I just don't remember the circumstances surrounding Sting going off for 6 months. I really don't. I don't know if it was an injury. I don't know what it was.
He actually wrote in the Players Tribune, Eric, that we talked about earlier, that this is when he had to go get off pills and alcohol, and that he was going to quit cold turkey. So that's
okay. That would make sense.
Yeah, that's what ended up happening. Are you in agreement after just signing Sting to his contract that he goes home and gets himself right? That hey, that's the right call at this point. Contract or no contract?
Of course, I did. I mean, look, I know we didn't have the drug intervention and rehab opportunities that WWE has today. We weren't able, like Tony Khan, because Tony Khan's a privately held corporation and he's a very generous and compassionate person that would likely just make the decision on his own to help somebody out if he felt that they needed it. I didn't have that. I was a part of a publicly held corporation and I had guidelines and rules and human resources and I had to treat everybody fair. I mean, it was more complex than someone would think. But within the circumstances that I had to work within and the company policy that I had to work within, I supported Scott Hall as best I could when Scott needed help. I supported Eddie Guerrero, when Eddie got hurt in a car wreck. I supported my talent as best that I could within the framework and the parameters that I had to work within because it was the right thing to do. With regard to Steve Borden, not only was I going to do what was the right thing to do professionally within the parameters and guidelines I had to work within, but on a personal level, Steve Borden was a friend of mine. Steve Borden came out to my house here in Wyoming. Steve and his ex-wife, his wife at the time, were going to buy a big piece of property right down the road from me. I had that relationship with Steve Borden, so of course I was supportive of it.
Do you remember seeing Sting being a changed man when he came back in 1999, or seeing changes in him, though, after that time period?
Yes. But it was subtle. I think looking back, the Steve Borden I would see backstage was more alive, just in a conversation. His eyes were brighter. He seemed to be enjoying life more, as opposed to the Steve Borden that I had gotten to know over the previous 12 months. That guy was always looking over his shoulder. He wasn't as confident in himself as the Steve Borden that came out of rehab. And I think it was just an indication of what we see now, right? I think Sting has grown. I hate to use the term reborn incorrectly, but I truly believe that Sting was reborn over that period of time. And the new Sting was a much more pleasant person to be around because he was happier with himself. It's like he lost 300 pounds and he had an elevated step. That's a great way to say it. He had an elevated step and presence, much more than he did when he left.
Clarity, I'm sure. Clarity. And man, so glad that, as we said earlier, that he rebounded from all the tragedy and struggles that he had. What a great story. 1998 Sting. Eric, we do have some fan questions this week. We're going to go rapid fire. We'll move quick. Some of these you answered as we went, so I don't expect very long answers, but we're going to give it a shot.
So this is a way of you saying, I got to get the fuck out of here, Eric. Would you please just get to the point and move on? Okay, I got it. Very subtle there, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, was it? It doesn't. I don't think it was. You got it. All right, here we go. Hazard F5. Our buddy Shane. Whose choice was it to put Sting in the Wolfpac, and was it a mistake too soon to drop the Crow character? I enjoyed his charisma in the group, but I felt the darker Crow character still had a hell of a lot more that could have been done with him before being dropped.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of Sting in the Wolfpac. I wasn't a fan of the Wolfpac. Not the people in it, not the basic story, but I don't think it was set up well enough. I don't think it was executed properly. So adding Sting into something that was kind of on shaky creative ground was clearly a mistake.
All right, up next, Mike Top Guy Whitaker, our buddy Mike Whitaker from Ad Free says, we all know that Sting's head wasn't in the game at Starrcade. How long into 1998 was he there? When did you see the changes that when you started to see the changes in him?
I think we just got done talking about it.
We did. All right, good stuff. Jason Bayless, Goldberg over the years has named Bobby Eaton and Sting as two of the guys he'd have openly lost the streak to. Was there any talk of that happening when he and Sting faced in September of 98?
Repeat that real quick. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Goldberg over the years named Bobby Eaton and Sting as two of the guys he would have openly lost his streak to. Was there any talk of that happening when he and Sting faced each other in September of 1998?
No. Nope.
All right.
And that, it says a lot for Bill and Bill's relationship, as we talked about with Sting. You asked me that question, how well those two guys get along. There's your answer right there. And Bobby Eaton, I think that's pretty damn cool.
That is awesome, isn't it?
That's
yeah.
Cool.
Says a lot for Bobby. Ryan Walker is up next. Is there anything you regret about Sting's bookings and his time in WCW in hindsight?
I think this whole show was dedicated to the ups and the downs and the good decisions and bad decisions there's always hindsight is an evil, sexy bitch, right? You can't help but look and spend time thinking about it, but it does you absolutely no good. So I don't think about it too much.
Rory Melberg says, and this is a fun one, which version of Sting do you enjoy the most? Eric, Surfer, Crow, or the Joker from the TNA days?
Yeah.
Your personal preference.
From a business perspective, Crow Sting. From a purely creative perspective, for a moment, Joker Sting.
Joker. That was a fun one. I enjoyed awesome. That one too. Yep.
Because he had so much more. He could do so much more. I mean, scary Sting, come out, scary, and point the bat. Action creates emotion, right? And the lack of action from scary Sting, for the most part, for such a long time, required that moody anticipation be turned up so high in order to keep the audience's attention, whereas Joker Sting got to do all kinds of wacky shit that would keep the audience's attention. And because of the wacky shit options creatively, it just was more fun. And it was very short-lived, but God, it was fun.
It was entertaining, man.
And you know what made it fun? Steve Borden had a great time doing it.
Yeah.
That's
comes
what
through.
made
it came
work.
Through. That's right. And it came
he
through.
Had so much fun doing that. And that connects. You often hear me talk about, somebody came up, Conrad asked me something about Ronda Rousey. And again, I don't know Ronda. I've never met Ronda. And I've never been backstage. I don't know anything about Ronda or what she's like to work with. All I know as a viewer, I don't think she's having fun. I don't think she's having fun as a heel. I don't think she's having fun as a babyface. I think she's going through, I don't want to say going through the motions because that suggests non-commitment. I think she's so uncomfortable in what she's doing that she doesn't yet know how to have fun doing it.
Yeah.
And that comes across to me as a viewer. And the opposite of that is Sting doing the Joker character. He was having so much fun with it that it was hard not to enjoy it.
With repetition and doing it more and more, and that's the green side of Ronda in wrestling. I would agree with you. I think as she gets more comfortable within herself and being on that stage, she will get better and better and better, and that won't come through.
I believe that. I mean, some of the stuff she does in the ring physically is like really cool shit. She's just got to find a way to enjoy doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, trust me, I understand how that works too. So adfreeshows.com top guy Mitchell Barnett asks, Eric, what in retrospect is your this is a question here. What in retrospect is your overall opinion of the NWO Wolfpac from a creative standpoint and from a purely business perspective? Merch sales, driving tickets, and pay-per-view sales, etc.
Look, it's all based everything. All of those things, merch sales, pay-per-views, ratings, all ticket sales, live event sales, whatever, all of that is story. It's all driven by story. And the problem I had with the Wolfpac is I don't think enough time and effort was put into the story behind the Wolfpac in order for it to have been as successful as it had the potential based on the people in it to be.
I like it. I agree. I think you give it a little bit more time to morph and to build and really make it special.
We rushed it. It was just, the original NWO that happened over a period of time. It started in May and it became a reality in July. Whereas Wolfpac became a reality next week. There just wasn't the time and the build and the identity that it needed in order for it to reach its potential. And it, again, had nothing to do with the people in it. It had a lot more to do with me and my lack of focus, my lack of creativity, as well as others who worked with me in that capacity. We were all, you go from building a fire to putting the fire out. Well, we were building the fire starting in 96, well, really starting in 95 with the debut of Nitro, and then continuing to build a fire in 96 with the NWO, and continuing to build the fire through 97 and up till this point, 98. And all of a sudden, we're not building fires anymore. We're trying to put them out. And I think the creative behind NWO Wolfpac was a victim of that.
3 more questions, Eric. Adfreeshows.com slapnut Brandon Newberry asked, did Sting or other NWO talent have a new shirt for every event waiting in the locker room, or do they just have someone grab one for them out of the merchandise truck to use on screen? Always curious how talent got the countless shirts that they wore at each and every event.
The latter.
There you go.
The latter. What do we got in the back?
Adfreeshows.com, my push member, Yambag Jones is up next and asks, is Steve Borden the most patient person ever in the history of the business for putting up with so much shit creatively?
Be careful with that, man. That's a negative. See, putting up with so much shit creatively. Here's a guy that got pushed to the moon as Surfer Sting. Here's a guy that recreated his career and his legacy with Surfer Sting. Were there ups and downs in between? Of course there were. But my God, he is 63 years old and is out there as the Crow character, which creatively is what his legacy is going to be. So I don't think that his career's been that bad or he's had to put up with that much crap. Any different than anybody else has.
Final question. Adfreeshows.com enhancement talent Steve Zentner asks, could he have benefited from a heel run in WCW? It seems he got lost in the shuffle at times with all the talent around him.
Well, we almost got the answer to that question, right? Sting was originally the third member in the NWO before Hulk Hogan stepped up and wanted that role. So we got damn close to finding out, but we never did we? And we'll never know.
Eric, I just got to say, I fill in for quite a few of Conrad shows. You get the most fan questions of anybody. People love to ask you questions and pick your brain. It's 83 weeks is where it's at, man.
Well, be careful, people. There's not much left.
Stop picking. No, I'm kidding. Speaking of picking his brain, you can do so live at supershowlive.com along with Jeff Jarrett, Jeff Hardy, and William Regal, along with Conrad. That's at Gillies in Dallas, Texas. Eric, I know you're excited about being a part of that event.
I can't wait to go to Gillies, man. Urban Cowboy, that was my jam back in 1976 or 7, whenever it came out. Yeah, I can't wait. But what I'm really excited about is this is available on pay-per-view.
It is.
So if anybody listening to this anywhere in the world, guess what? Love to have you at Gillies. Hope to see you there. But if you can't make it to Dallas, you can do the next best thing and be there live. It'll be fun. I encourage you. Buy it live.
What an incredible event that Conrad and team and all of you guys have put together. It is going to be incredible. Go to supershowlive.com. As Eric said, streaming exclusively on Fight TV. And man, what an event. It's Friday, April 1st, Super Show Live. And I know Conrad. We know he's got more surprises up his sleeve. There's already enough talent that's been mentioned, but there's going to be more, Eric. That's what he does.
Yeah, there is. And it's so much fun. I told Conrad the other day, we were talking about this, and it's just amazing to me that we're doing this live show on pay-per-view. I mean, a couple of years ago it was, hey, let's go do this live show. There'll be 200 or 300 people there. It'll be fun. And now we're doing it on pay-per-view, and we've got amazing talent. Jeff Hardy, can't say enough great things about Jeff. Steven Regal, huge fan, nothing but love and respect. And everybody else that's going to be there, Jeff Jarrett and I have gotten to be better friends now than we've ever been, and we've known each other for a couple decades. Conrad Thompson, can't say enough for him. He's the glue that brings us all together and holds it together, and we build upon. And I'm just grateful to be there, man. I'm along for the ride and grateful to be invited.
Well, buddy, you guys aren't done there, because on Friday, May 20th, it's 83 weeks live in Oshkosh. Conrad and Eric, they're going to be in Oshkosh at the Time Community Theater for an exclusive live 83-week show. Tickets are just $30 and are on sale right now at acwwisconsin.com. That's acwwisconsin.com, all one word. And then the next night, on the 21st, you guys aren't done, at ACW Water City Wrestling Con, featuring Eric Bischoff, Malachi Black, Danhausen, The Godfather, and many more. You can get your tickets at acwwisconsin.com for that live appearance from Eric as well. Eric, you're going to be busy, man. You're all over.
You know what's fun about the Wisconsin shows that we're doing? It's a week before my birthday, and it's Wisconsin. I love the state of Wisconsin. I love the people in the state of Wisconsin. They know how to party, and they know how to have fun. And I'm going to start celebrating my birthday that weekend in Wisconsin. So come on out.
And I don't know a whole bunch about the event. Is this a David Hero venture put on? No? Okay. All right. Well, regardless, he's a good guy too. Check it out, acwwisconsin.com, and celebrate Eric Bischoff's birthday with him early. You can see him and Conrad together Friday night, and then Saturday for the appearance. Eric, next week, you and Conrad will be back off the beach with your tan bods, and you're going to be talking all things about Sid. We'll be discussing Sid's return to WCW in 1993, the Beach Blast mini movie, his eventual push to be champion, the stabbing incident with Sid and Arn. You guys are going to get into it, and I can't wait to hear it.
I look forward to it, man. Thank you very much, Paulie, for sitting in for the big man. I appreciate it. I know our listeners do, and you enjoy the rest of your week, my friend.
All right, Eric. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk soon next time here on 83 Weeks with Eric Bischoff.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.